Welcome to the Festival of Media Asia Pacific here in Singapore on the first day of the conference. I'm absolutely delighted to say I'm joined by Cheryl Goh from GrabTaxi, possibly the most popular speaker at the festival today. And a really, great response to your talk that you just delivered a moment ago about what is a fantastic Southeast Asian success story, competing and succeeding against global brands. One of the things you talked about was the importance of a hyper-local philosophy and attitude and how that's helped the brand. Could you talk a bit more about that for us?
Yeah, sure. So, at GrabTaxi, I think for us, we really look at, so I think the biggest misconception is that Southeast Asia is like one country or one continent and people are very similar. I think for us, we understand because we live here that every country is very different. Like the taxi problem in Malaysia and Singapore is completely different, and the problem to solve and the reason for being is very different. And so I think, that's why whenever we approach a problem, we approach it from a country level lens, and we try to really come up with a solution. So much so that when people talk about our product, they say, yeah, they really made a difference. But what that difference is, it really depends on which country we're in. So in Philippines, people will say that taxis are so much safer. In Singapore, people will say taxis are so much more easier to get, right? And so I think that's what we really focus on. Yeah.
In terms of the development across those markets, you mentioned that GrabTaxi is the market leader in all metrics in those markets. Has that been relatively easy? Has there been a sort of a captive market that you've been able to kind of, come and offer your product to?
So in every market, it's slightly different. In some markets, there's already an incumbent or an existing taxi app that might have been here longer than us by a year or so. Some markets, we're the first mover. Some markets, we really need to sort of like do a lot of education. Like when we show a smartphone to a driver, they say, oh, it's a spoiled phone. And I'm like, no, it works. They say, but they're used to Nokia phones, which always show the time, even when it's off. So every market is very different. But I think we've had a lot of success simply because we really go out there and solve a problem. Yeah. So, of course, some markets we've had to maybe fight with an existing player. There will be like a bit of price cutting and things like that. But so far, we've been able to just sort of do better than everyone else. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of the big topics of the festival has been partly how global brands are trying to adapt themselves for Asia and to succeed in Asia, but also how Asian brands are looking to the rest of the world now to expand. Is that something that GrabTaxi is potentially looking at? And I suppose what comes next for GrabTaxi?
Right. I think for us, we really are not the kind of company that wants to be in like 100 cities and just put our flag there without making a real impact. And I think today, just in Southeast Asia, there's still so much that we can do. We are very much in taxis, but I think there are other forms of transport like bikes, for example, which we could expand our service in. So I think what's next is really about just expanding in Southeast Asia, being number one in terms of taxis. So not just taxi bookings, but taxis, because today more people still queue up, more people still go to the side of the road and try to hail a taxi than people booking through an app. And I think that's where a lot of our growth will come from, not so much out of Southeast Asia. Mm-hmm.
And final question, and as a marketer operating in the region, so many fascinating stories we've heard already in terms of some of the innovations and the trends. From your perspective, what do you think is the most interesting or the most exciting or the most important trend that's currently dominating the industry in this region?
I think for us, because it's very funny because we've always been a digital company. We've always been sort of like everything that we have is online, on mobile and everything. So what's interesting for us is actually more the traditional stuff, the way that when I hear people talk about brand and the way it connects. I think that's something that just for us, we don't do a good enough job at. I think we're very utilitarian as a service, as a product, and we try to over-exceed in providing that service. But I think being able to connect emotionally to the consumer is something that I've enjoyed listening to at this conference.
Well, thank you for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.